You're listening to Yo FM,
Pursuing Ancestral Medicine with
Vanessa Nino Tapia and
Cesar Barreras, coming to you live from
Plains Maidu and Nisenan Territory, otherwise known as Sacramento, California,
and Kumeyaay Territory here in Southern California.
Okay, Manahu, that's how you say hello in my tribal language. Manahu, my name is Tabitha Smith. I am from the North Fork Mono tribe here in Central Valley, California. And on my grandmother's side, I'm also Concow, Maidu, Wailaki from Mendocino County up north. On my grandfather's side, and I'm also Malaysian on my father's side. So I'm embracing that part of me, still learning a lot about all my tribes and cultures. I am originally from Sacramento, and I was born and raised there. I attended American River College, where I graduated, moved on to San Diego State. I studied astronomy, American Indian Studies, and I say my day job is I'm an administrative manager, which is like super boring. It pays the bills. However, I'm very passionate about just writing. I feel like I call myself an emerging writer. I'm still learning, definitely still developing technique. I am published, as Vanessa had mentioned. I tend to lean towards poetry, memoir poetry. Most of the time, it's very personal to me. And so I'm currently residing in North County, San Diego, which is unceded Kumeyaay territory, and very thriving with a lot of the tribes that are down here. Very beautiful people that have welcomed me here. Right now, I'm really focusing on intentional living, and living more with intention and not so reactive to the world in general, and just trying to assert my presence in this life, and being able to give back to others that are still on their journey in different places. And so I'm about 10 years into my sobriety, alcohol-free.
Yes, congratulations.
And that has been, a journey all its own. But I feel good and I feel happy, and that's just a little bit. And something that most people don't know is that I'm an absolute water baby. I mean, some people know this that are close to me. A lot of people do not know this. Water in our language is paya. I was born in the summertime. I learned how to swim very young. I just feel such a connection to the water, as most of us do. It's just cleansing, healing, energizing. So all things water. I love to swim. I love the ocean. Yeah.
And correct me if I'm wrong, I always see like narwhal posts.
Oh,
is
my
that your
God.
favorite?
Yes. Okay, I'm gonna go off the rails.
There you go.
So all right. So not just water, but I am absolutely and this is probably where I should have went. I love sea creatures. And so I actually have like my top 3 sea creatures, which constantly, I'm pretty solid right now. But number 1 is a narwhal, which is from the Arctic. It's like a whale or porpoise. I can't quite remember, but it has that very long tooth that sticks out like a unicorn horn. My number 2 is a mola sunfish that are primarily, I believe, off the Pacific coast, but I think they travel also. But they're massive. And then I love great white sharks. So
I didn't know that one. I didn't know the great white sharks.
I'm just equally fascinated and terrified by them. So yes, I love learning about marine life, and I love it, actually. So thank you for
That's wonderful. And maybe just if people are curious, the way we met, if it's okay if I describe that. So I think I was a sophomore in college, and I went to an American Indian Science Engineering Society conference. I forget which one it was at. I'd have to look up the year. But I just remember going to this panel, and you were on the panel, and I was just so in awe and just like, who is this incredible person with this light that is shining so bright in this world? And I just was like, wow, I gotta meet this person. So I think I went up to you afterwards just to thank you for doing the panel. And then I don't know how, but I came across you on like social media, or I don't know if we exchanged numbers or somehow that happened, but we kind of just followed each other, and we would see each other like at Sacramento powwow and things like that. So we got to do a shout out to ACES, because we got some folks that are part of ACES.
Yes.
So definitely that's how we met. That's how we connected.
ACES.
So love
Yes.
it. Yes.
Yes, the American Indian Science Engineering Society. In college, I want to say my sophomore year, I was elected as a Region 2 student representative. So I had the opportunity, I represented Nevada, California, and Hawaii. And I got to attend the annual leadership conferences, the national conferences that we had. And it was amazing. I do remember meeting you. I always, first of all, to meet another Cali resident in another state, what meant a lot to me. And then you were from Sacramento, which is where I'm from. And then we're both into science, which means we're nerds. And so I was just like, yes. So I really do honor our friendship, because it has grown over a long period of time. Through distance also, but also I feel like we've just really been there for each other during, some difficult times in our lives. So thank you.
Yes, definitely. And so I'm wondering, Cesar, if you have a question that you'd like to ask, since this is your first time getting to meet Tabby, if there's something that you'd like to pose to her.
First of all, Tabby or Tabitha, which one would you prefer that I used to?
Either one is fine, whatever you're comfortable with.
Okay, it's awesome. Well, first of all, very interesting person. I was involved with ACES maybe for a bit. I started as biochem, but then I fell in love with anthropology and American Indian Studies.
Okay.
So I kind of fell off the rail, but
yes,
I really enjoyed the way you described a learning process for coming in contact with so many cultures, because that's not something that we typically see from our native people. Kind of acknowledging, we typically see one person, if they're of multiple ethnicities, just paying attention to one ethnicity. That was really interesting. Can you tell us a little bit about how that journey has come about, connecting with all three cultures that are, all three of them are equally beautiful? So how does that come about, if you don't mind me asking?
Right. Well, I think just learning more about our culture, right? So like we grow up, we just know we're native, it's not, everyone's journey is different. So I want to say, their identity and the way that they relate to their culture is different. And so I primarily grew up with my mother and my grandmother, who raised me. And my grandmother is from the North Fork Mono Eagle clan. And so I was primarily raised with her. So I'm closer to my grandmother's side. I know more about that tribe. But as I got older, my grandfather had passed away before I was even born. So, there's just a bit of disconnect there, and our families are so removed. Most of them still live up north, Round Valley Reservation up there. And so people still keep in touch, but I just didn't have that closeness, So I think as I got older, I think most of us understand that, going to college, we get exposed to a lot of the histories and a lot of the just history in general of our tribal people here in California or wherever you are, that we don't get to learn in school, or even stories and, historical things that had happened to our ancestors. Those things aren't spoke about enough, I think, and I know there's a time and place for it, and a way to address them and meet them with compassion, because a lot of those things are painful to hear and process. And I feel like I went through a lot of that in college. I was away from home, learning all of these things. And then you could kind of see, okay, well, those histories play into the intergenerational traumas that still affect our people. And then you start to look at your family and your circles, and you're just like, wow, I see this playing out still hundreds of years later. And so that really, any chance I get, try to educate myself a little bit more about it, and ask questions, when I'm around, when my grandma was here, my uncle's around, my aunties, my mom, I'm constantly asking questions and just trying, hey, do you remember anyone mentioning this? Or, oh, hey, do you remember when, the American Indian movement was just really gaining force and took over here in California, and the whole occupation of Alcatraz, like, so and my mom was young during that time. So it is just, I feel like a lifetime learner, and I really connect with that too, as a part of who I am. I love learning more about me and all of those parts and pieces. I also never knew my father growing up, and just now as an adult I start questioning, who was this man, and what did he do, and where is he from? And so Vanessa knows I've kind of been on this fact-finding journey. Not that, and I wanted to make this clear, not that I was missing anything. I feel whole as I am and as I was raised. But I'm just curious to see another person, the person that I had came from. And so I am embracing, I know that I'm Malaysian. I know I have a lot of the features. I know, my father's name and the village he came from, and, that he studied physics, and then I'm interested in science, so it's just those connections. And I feel like for all of us, native or non-native, I really, really encourage people to learn more about your heritage, learn more about your family lines and your ancestry. And it really does help solidify who you are and what you will continue to teach your children and grandchildren and nieces and nephews and the younger generations before us.
I love that. It just reminds me of a saying, I don't remember where I've heard it from, but there's a saying that I'm all the faces of my family. And it just reminds me of that. Like I was talking to a friend the other day, and I was telling him about the podcast. And I told him, when we talk about ancestral medicine, I'm talking about all my ancestors. Like, I want to know about all my ancestors. So just knowing that we're all the faces of our family is just really, there's a comfort in that. Knowing, again, emphasizing that point that, we're not alone, that we come from these histories. And just as we have this intergenerational trauma, there's also this, and just even being here, existing in this space together with you all, this intergenerational growth that's happening. So, yes, totally.
Yes. And I love being a part of that dialogue and just the acknowledgement of it, with others outside of our family.
Well, I'm really excited because today marks a really special day. It marks the end of National Poetry Month, which was April, and the beginning of Mental Health Awareness Month, which I always look forward to each year. And so I'm just wondering if you're willing, if you could share maybe how these two topics, poetry and mental health, are personally meaningful to you.
Yes, absolutely. I haven't always been a poet. I think I love to write, and I've journaled all of my life. And I've used journaling as a way for me to process my thoughts and my emotions. And I don't think it was until high school, I was just thinking about this. So this incident had happened in high school, and it was something in the news, in the media, something very tragic, to a young girl around my age. And I just had so many thoughts and feelings about it. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to write. And I actually remember writing a poem about it. And then I shared it with my class. And it was just interesting because a lot of people in the class were like, oh my God, I was thinking about that too, and so it felt like I had given a voice to thoughts that other people have inside, or that even I had inside and didn't actually know how to express them. And so I've kind of used poetry in that way. And I never, I never actually, no one ever said like, hey, you're a poet, right? I just always wrote, I wrote things and then tucked them away. And I was like, this is just for me. I don't think anybody would resonate with that. And then slowly I began to introduce some of my poetry into the world in my circles, and I also failed to mention that I do mentoring. So I do academic mentoring, personal mentoring to Native youth and family members. And, I just try to be that person that I didn't always have for me, helping guide my path in education. And so when I started sharing my poetry, it started resonating. And that was it was amazing for me, because these are thoughts that had been stuck in my mind or in my heart. And I didn't think anyone else felt that way, and I think for a lot of us, when we're processing emotion, it's very isolating at times, right? Because we're like, I don't know if anyone else feels that way, but I do. And, so when I started noticing that, and then getting on to further on to starting my sobriety journey and starting to process emotions unfiltered is how I said it. I was never an alcoholic. I think I was a college student who would go to parties like anyone else. Well, like some people, I won't say everybody, but I just didn't know my limits, and so that put me in some very unsafe situations. And so when I started on my journey, I really had a lot of feelings and thoughts and processes that I was going through, didn't quite understand. And so I wrote a lot more, and I really started uncovering a bunch of layers that I didn't even know about myself. And I think about 4 or 5 years in to my sobriety is when I started recognizing signs of anxiety. And the way it manifested in me was that I would feel these pinches in my chest. And I literally thought I was having a heart attack. Like, I'm in a board meeting and I'm sitting there and I'm like, something is wrong. Like, I don't know what this is. And, so I ended up going to the hospital, getting all these tests done. My heart is strong. All my blood work is good. They're like, maybe it's just stress. Maybe you should talk to somebody. And I'm like, just like everybody else, I'm going to school, I'm working full time, also dealing with family stuff. And so it really, so that's when I started exploring what is anxiety, how it manifests. It's not just a mental illness, but it also manifests physically with physical symptoms. And that now I know that those pings in my chest, I call them pings, are actually panic attacks in me. That is a panic attack. And that means that my body is like signaling danger, danger, when in reality, I may not be in present danger. This is my anxiety telling me that I'm catastrophizing, thinking about worst case scenarios to the point where I'm so worried and so worked up that it's really impacting my life. And I never knew that, so eventually I wrote about that. I wrote some pieces about that. And that's really what started my journey into learning more about mental health, learning more about anxiety, and using writing as healing. And just truly acknowledging it for what it was, not just journaling, but actually healing, thinking about those traumas that my ancestors endured, traumas that I endured, traumas that others have endured, and being able to find a way to reconcile them within my own mind and heart, and then take that and try to make a beautiful life. Take all that pain. And this is one of my favorite quotes is, take your pain and use it as fuel for the journey. And I feel like that is something that, it's not my quote, but it's but it's one that that really really resonates with me. So yeah, that is the heart connection between mental health and poetry for me.
I think it's very powerful indeed. I think you expanded so much into the question in a very deep way. That's definitely going to help myself personally. I think all those who are listening, I think they're going to gain a lot from it. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
You know, I wanted to ask. You touch a bit about poetry and how powerful of a way of a tool it has become in your life for you to heal. I mean, that's very powerful. You said not just use writing as journaling, but use it as a tool to heal. And I think that opens up an avenue that a lot of people definitely don't see it that way. And I think that's powerful that you see it that way. So I wanted to ask, would you be willing to share with us one of your poems today?
Yes. So I actually have two, if that's okay. They're pretty short. But one, I feel like I captured in the moment. So, anxiety, general anxiety is what I was diagnosed with, and millions of people within the United States suffer from this type of mental illness. And it is curable. There are people that live with it their entire lives. My counselor kind of describes it as, it's kind of it goes up and down. There are times in our life when it's just dormant and, we're able to live our lives as normal. And then we encounter situations that really, all those alarms start going off. And then we have to utilize our toolkit to be able to help us get through those difficult times. So I'll go ahead and read the first one, which I actually captured one night while I was having one of those moments of like extreme anxiety. And then I'll read another one that's just a little bit more ancestral, relating to the ancestral healing. So this first one is called Slipping Out of Slumber. Slipping out of slumber, a reel of negatives play in my mind. Eyes wide shut, I watch each painful admonition project directly onto my aching heart. I feel a pinch with each frame that flutters past so fast I could hardly keep track of which nightmare is being featured this time. Sigh. It's intermission. I cry. Then I pray. Thank you, Creator, for this day. The lights turn on and I wake. Damn you, anxiety. I could have gone without your malicious matinee. And so that's just a very short piece, but I think it is reminiscent to those moments when we have that deep anxiety when we're thinking of worst case scenario, and you really have to like bring yourself back in and say, okay, I recognize this, I acknowledge it, right? All of these thoughts and feelings that are just a constant replay in your mind, acknowledging it, being able to sit with it, and then kind of get yourself back to a space where, okay, I recognize on it, I reflect, and I release it, because I know that while those situations, are they possible? True, but the odds of them actually happening are very, very small. And so bringing myself back to reality, and then it's like, oh, anxiety, so that is slipping into slumber. And then the second one, which I feel is actually one of my first ones that I had published in News from Native California, which I'm very, very thankful for. And the first of the 4 that I've had featured so far. So this one is called Blood Ties and Battle Cries. My spirit connects genetically to the soil upon which my ancestors' blood was spilled. Its roots nourished by the tears of too many mothers who had to relinquish their flesh back to the earth mother that birthed her people. Seed sown in sorrow gives rise to the most bountiful fruit, the kind of gift our grandmothers prayed for, singing amongst clouds of interstellar nurseries. not yet coalesced into particle, but somehow powerful enough to permeate dimensions, calling out to all warriors to rally the troops. Whispers within dreams of water, my heart is washed anew. The beat and battle cries echo between mountains, never fade, but reverberate generations into eternity. Thank you.
Wow. That was spectacular. Both pieces, incredible, just incredible. I just admire your words so much because they're transformative. They have this powerful protection about them by speaking them out loud. It's like you're calling in protection to yourself and to others. And so I'm just so grateful that I feel so privileged that we have you here today sharing your work. It's incredible work.
I truly appreciate it.
I said it truly is a blessing to be present today. And one of those powerful things is I'm listening to you reading this. It's I can imagine the impact that it had in you as a person writing it, but it's also the impact that it has on people listening to it that creates this very powerful bond between you, yourself, and others who are benefiting from this. So thank you for doing that. It's powerful.
One question that I'm because this is our second time having a guest, and so we're kind of still formulating, right? And so one question that I think would be really helpful to ask each person that comes on and joins us is, and I think you kind of answered this with your poem, but if you want to say it in a different way, what does ancestral medicine mean to you?
I was thinking about this, and to me, I think today, like in modern times now, in modernity, we are bombarded with stuff, with our jobs, with expectations from society, expectations from our family and ourselves, and the need to please, and all of this stuff that surrounds us. And when I think back, whenever I get so caught up, I try to remind myself. one of my quotes is, "What would the ancestors do?" And sure, it was a much simpler time. I mean, I don't want to say simpler because they had their own struggles and survival that they had to go through, but in terms of creating a life for themselves, right? Everybody had a job. I think a lot of people struggle with that, like, what is my purpose and what should I be doing in life? And if you think back to ancestral times, there were many roles. You had your warriors, you had your nurturers, you had your teachers, you had your spiritual leaders, you had your healers, you had so many different roles, and everyone had a job. And you had the daylight, your hours, your time was the daylight to do what you needed to do, to gather the medicine, to be able to take care of yourself and survive on this land and live another day. And so I think when I think of ancestral healing, I think about that. I think about stripping away all of the stuff that we're surrounded by now, by all the things that we think actually matter, and thinking about life as it truly is, and what we really need to move forward, and just really getting back down to basics, as far as nourishment, really, really, really nourishing foods, right? Our traditional foods, getting back to more water. The paya heals us, the water heals us. Getting back to even our medicines. Sure, there are a lot of modern medicines that are helping a lot of us get through life each day, but also I think there's a benefit in also stripping away a lot of the chemicals that we're surrounded by each and every day, to be able to get back to baseline and think about what we truly need, and in all things, even in healing. And I think there's a lot of societal pressures out there on people, and I feel them every day, even going on social media, even just within our own circle of friends. Sometimes, the grass always looks greener. But I think that if we strip all that stuff away and you think about who I am as a person, who I am as a human being, as a woman, as a man, as a, whatever your identity, whatever you relate with, and what that role is, and what you have to contribute to the world, and what you need in order to do that is very simple. And that to me is ancestral healing, being able to draw from our ancestors and the way that they lived and the things that they did. And it's not always easy. It's not always easy. We can't find all our medicines and all of our traditional foods in the grocery stores and whatnot. But, that's a part of decolonizing, right, a little bit, and learning who the people are that do grow our food, and what hopefully they're not using anything, pesticides and those type of things, and also just prayer, the power of prayer. I think we had mentioned this the other day. I think we're a praying people, and the power of prayer is transformative, in someone's lives. And sometimes we don't necessarily know how to do that for ourselves. And it's important to surround yourself by good people. And that's a part of also ancestral healing. We didn't always do it alone. We did it as a community, as a family. And so it's great to see that in a lot of our communities. And even this space, you guys have created a space where, your listeners and other people, panelists that will be joining, can all offer a little something to contribute to that. So,
Tabby, if you could turn back the time and talk to your 18-year-old self, what would you tell her?
So I really gave this one some thought, because someone had asked me this a while ago. My answer was completely different. I was like, what I should have said was to honor yourself. Honor yourself. I think as a young adult, and even my own 18-year-old self, we live so much for others. We live so much for the acceptance of others. And and I know I can only speak for myself, but I was just led by, you just wanted to be with your friends, to have fun, to do all of these things. And sometimes those things weren't always in your best interest. You were just doing them because all the rest of your friends were doing that. And I think a lot of us as adults, we know now, right, that feeling that you get in the pit of your stomach when you're just like, this does not feel right. And usually it is not. And so as an 18-year-old, I would definitely tell her to honor yourself in all things that you do, and show up for yourself. I think at that age, we're just so, we're influenced by so many people and so many external forces that we don't necessarily know who we are. I think we're trying to figure out our identities. We're trying to figure out our place in this world. And a lot of that heartache comes from the confusion of not knowing what our purpose is, or where we're supposed to be, or what we're supposed to do. And I feel like that if at that age I would have known to honor myself, the first thing that you do is honor yourself in everything that you do, that you can never go wrong. You will never go wrong. And just instead of doing things for other people or because someone else wanted to do it, you're doing what's what is in their view, and not necessarily what's best for you. And so just always know that you know what's best for you. You know deep down what's best for you, and just to take that first step and show up for yourself and honor yourself. And along the way, you'll figure it out. And we're still figuring it out. Well, I'm still figuring it out. So
it's a lifelong process.
yes, but thank you. And it takes a lot to do that, right? Because sometimes we don't even feel worthy of acknowledging good things for ourselves. That, and that's another part of it. We have to be able to recognize and to acknowledge that we are worthy of good things. We are worthy of a good life, of a happy life, of a safe life. And the way that we see, you know, the things that we see and the things that people do, not everything is for us. And so honor yourself in all things that you do. And you will never be led wrong. Thank you.
I think you touched a lot about this, but going into the question, it mentions, I like to describe a goal for our podcast as a healing project, because you mentioned, right, ancestral healing, right, and we see medicine as an avenue to, that heals our bodies, that heals our minds, our hearts, our spirits. So, what we want to ask you is, how does sharing your story and your writing benefit your growth and healing, and what are you hoping others can gain from listening to you, not just today, but also through your writing and what you do in the daily life?
Wow, that's a great question. That's a great question. I think, being able just to acknowledge, some things, there's a lot of things that we think of, that we feel in our hearts, that we observe even in others. Maybe it's something that's not even happening to us, but maybe happening outside of us. And being able to acknowledge it. That's like the first, what they say with the first part of healing is being able to acknowledge it. And so I think writing creates this very safe space for you to be able to get all of those thoughts and feelings out on a piece of paper. How do you feel about that? What do you see happening? Who is a part of that, and what are people's roles, and what is your role, right? And that's also so important. What is your role in it? And maybe you don't even have a role. Maybe you're just a spectator, but it's very important to acknowledge that, that sometimes we do get hurt just by being a spectator of other people's pains and traumas and experiences in life. And so writing has really given me a safe space for me to process and acknowledge experiences as they come up within me. And then when I put them into poetry, I was thinking about this, because as a scientist, right, they always say theories, when they're very complicated, a lot of times they're not fully baked, right? So a theory usually is something that's very simple. You stripped it all of all the stuff, and it's very, very plain, cut and dry. And that's how I think about poetry. So I wrote these 3 pages about all the stuff that I'm experiencing. But if I stripped out all of that stuff and left bare bones for it, and to have someone read it and understand exactly what I meant, that to me is, an amazing way to be able to get out a message that I wasn't even really sure. Sometimes the messages come as I'm editing something down, and I'm like, wow, what does that really mean? What am I really trying to convey? And so when another person reads it and they resonate with it, and they're like, wow, like that, that hit me. That was something I had never thought about, or I had never connected, or, maybe it triggered something positively, in their train of thought. And that's just amazing to me, because as humans, having a human experience, we're all so different. Our lives are so unique in so many ways, but to be able to have that, I think we spoke about this, about the vulnerability of being able to speak what's on your mind and what's on your heart, and put it into words in such a way that other people can relate to it, understand it. It gives them also an opportunity to acknowledge those same, or maybe something similar, experiences that are going on in their lives, and help guide them. And I think that's another beautiful thing about poetry is, and Joy Harjo, amazing woman, amazing woman. Muskogee Creek, she's currently the U.S. Poet Laureate. April, National Poetry Month, I I try to sign on to every single Zoom that she's been a part of because I just love being in her presence. But she speaks about how writing creates a map. And I thought about and how that relates to my writing, and how, you know, it acknowledges the pain, acknowledges the struggle, but it also is a pathway to trying to find a way to reconcile it, and to find beauty and strength, and like you said, resilience, and take that and be able to move forward in whatever you want to do, and trying to live your best life. So that's how I feel about the connection and being able to write and using it as a way to communicate with others, and give other individuals the chance to process as well.
So you mentioned vulnerability, right? We do have a question about vulnerability I would like to share.
Yes.
I don't know if everyone knows Brene Brown, but I know we both have a shared love for Brene Brown. And one thing that she states that I absolutely love is that there's power in vulnerability. And each of us here today, we've each had vulnerable moments in our lives where it was important to meet ourselves with self-compassion rather than judgment. And so I'm wondering if you would be willing to share a powerful moment you've had when you practice self-compassion during a time of vulnerability.
Yes. This actually this was not too long ago, but and it was just amazing to me. I have been in counseling for 2.5 years, ever since finding out, that I had these symptoms of anxiety. And then I was like, well, I have insurance, I should use it. And, went through the process of trying to find a provider, which many of you know can be a difficult process within itself. But I just encourage you to stay the course, and hopefully you will be able to get an appointment and find someone that, can really support you in learning. And so through this process, it was 10 years, like 10 years later, that this period of my life prior to starting my journey of sobriety had happened. And I had, it was just like, it was so fresh again, like it had happened yesterday. And, drinking and surrounding myself with people that probably weren't the best people, for me to be around, and putting myself in unsafe situations, and having caused some kind of harm to me. And so I was like reliving this experience all over again, 10 years later, something in me. And that's, and that's a part of healing too. It doesn't always happen on your own timeline. Sometimes slowly those layers are peeled away, and then all of a sudden these things rise up, and you're like, whoa, I'm here, right? But now I have to face it unfiltered, right? And look back at myself during that time 10 years ago. And during that time I felt grief, like, wow, I can't believe I felt shame, like, for shame, like, like, why was I putting myself in these positions and situations, and surrounding myself with people that weren't quality people, and just really, at that time I was just very embarrassed. I was very embarrassed, and a lot of people, some parts and stories of your life, not everybody knows or had access to. It's one of those things that had happened. I just kind of pushed it away, like, oh, that was just a really bad, that was just a really bad night. But it presented itself again, and I had all these feelings, and I talked to my counselor about it, and she told me to, I had to forgive myself. I had to practice forgiveness within myself, because I was only doing what I thought. I was younger. I was living in a city where I didn't have any family. I found friends. I make friends very easily. I feel like I'm a very personable person, and I'm a very trusting person. And sometimes a lot of people aren't worthy of being trusted, and so, she was like, that's not your fault. You know, it's not your fault that you thought you could trust people and they ended up not being able to be able to protect you, and to give myself grace. And so I felt like I had really I was vulnerable during that time because it felt like it had just happened all over again. And how do you explain this to, like, even my husband, who, you know, that was even before I had met my husband, you know, so to have to explain this situation to him also. And I really did just take time to, well, one, write, because writing is healing, and getting it all out, and just telling myself that it was okay. We make mistakes. You know, sometimes we see things in people that, you know, they're not true to who they are, and that's not my fault. You know, I tried to give them the benefit of the doubt, but she made it clear to think about where I am now. Right? Where am I now? I'm here. I am 10 years into sobriety. I'm surrounded by loving, caring, supportive friends and family. I'm safe. You know, so she really guided me through that, and to be able to, just to be able to process it for what it was, accept it for what it was, to forgive myself, and to move forward. So it was very difficult. It was very difficult, and I still struggle with it. But I'm just so thankful that Creator protected me and has brought me here, and that I could look back on that time and be like, oh, you silly girl.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you silly girl. But yeah.
I just want to say it's been an honor, Tabitha, to get to know you, and I think there's so many things that you mentioned that really resonate with, you know, particularly your last statements. You mentioned something that kind of just resonates so true with part of the struggles I've been having this whole past year. But you mentioned that healing is not on our own timeline, but it happens, you know, when it just presents itself, right?
Right.
But at the same time, you also mentioned towards the end, you said, I look back now and I realize I'm safe. But at the same time, you say, you know, you silly girl, you know, you're
Yes.
almost,
Yes.
you know, kind of the way I saw it, you know, it's you've grown so much from that experience, and you grow so, you know, so mature from whatever the situation was and whatever the people you were surrounded by, but you learn, you grew from that. And I think that's something that I truly want to get to that point. You know, I know healing doesn't happen on our own timeline, but I think it's inspirational and motivational for me to realize, and for me to think and invite people listening, you know, there is that hope, you know, and it's turned out so well for you. So I'm sure if we're going through difficulties, there's always that way out. And thank you for sharing that part of your life, which is inspirational.
Thank you. Thank you. You know, and we're just, you know, we live and we learn, and, you know, we just have to try to make the most of this life and learn from our mistakes, and hopefully be able to move forward. I mean, I think we all know that there's some mistakes that, you know, obviously there's no recourse for, but, you know, hopefully we can have the grace and be able to love and nurture ourselves through those moments of vulnerability, and be able to make it to the other side. And I talk to Vanessa all the time about the other side, right? When we go through those difficult times and you can't see outside of that dark cloud, and then the cloud lifts and you're on the other side, and you're like, I made it, and I feel good, and I'm happy, and I'm healthy, and it's a beautiful feeling.
It's possible.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And that's, you know, I think I'm still learning about mental health and mental health issues, and you know, different ways of treatments and all of those kind of things. But there is hope. You know, there is hope. There's a tremendous amount of resources and tools and methods and support groups and systems, and, you know, different things work for different people, but you have to give it a try, and you have to be willing to step out on faith and find what works for you. And then when you find what works for you, make sure to keep it close. I have a journal of mine. This is a journal that someone had recently got me. It says follow your heart, and I write all my heart stuff in there, and just as a remembrance to go back and, you know, remind myself of the good things that I can use to be able to help me through those difficult times.
I think that's really powerful in describing about writing, that it gives us an opportunity to reflect. Just showing your journal. I have a journal that I've had for 9 years, and I'm finally almost finishing it.
Oh, wow.
And it's funny because my therapist was saying, you know, why don't you just start a new journal? If that's what you want to do, just start a new journal. I was like, no, I have to finish this. Like this represents a whole chapter that I'm leaving behind. I'm moving forward from, and I want to complete it. I want to close the loop on it. And yeah, it's being able to reflect back and see those moments of pure joy and also pain. To look back and just look at my past self and smile and be like, hey girl, it's gonna be okay. You're gonna get there. Just to do that is an incredible gift. So I see that in you. I see that your light is always shining, and it's always shining for others too. And that for you to be able to speak on these things, sharing your story, sharing your growth, letting people know, letting our listeners know, hey, it's possible. I know it's hard. I know that when we're in it, there's this absence of hope, but it exists somewhere, and it's worth trying for. It's worth trying to go for. So I appreciate you so much, Tabby, and I gotta thank you for joining us today and sharing your story.
Well, thank you so much, and it means a lot to me too. I think we had discussed, you know, I still feel, you know, I'm still starting out too. You know, I'm just, like I said, I you know, I feel like I'm an emerging poet. You know, I'm an emerging writer. I'm still learning, and you know, to be able to be welcomed into these spaces by my friends and my sisters, and, you know, to acknowledge my words, it means a lot. It means a lot, especially knowing that, you know, those words came from, you know, it wasn't all out of fun. You know, some of them are good and lighthearted. A lot of them stem from a lot of pain. So I really appreciate that. And it's absolutely true. There's definitely hope. You know, acknowledging it is the first thing, and then finding the support, and being able to reflect upon it. And then, so that's another one of my mottos. So recognize, reflect, and release. So being able to recognize what it is, reflect on it, and then release it. Release that energy back out into the world. You don't need to carry it. That's another thing I love about writing. I don't have to, once I release those thoughts and feelings onto the paper, or even a lot of people write on laptops, tablets, you know, whatever you have available. A lot of times I use my phone. I just wrote a piece on my phone the other day. But it doesn't have to live in me. I don't have to carry those thoughts and feelings all the time. That's a huge release, to be able to release that and just say, okay, now you live here, and I don't have to carry you with me, and it relieves a burden. And also knowing, you know, seeing the words, it's kind of like when I see a poem and I see it completed, and it's just like, wow, I released, you know, that was my release. That was my release of those experiences that had happened, and it's helped me. It's helped me, and I'm still learning. So.
I have a cousin who says, I don't want those things in the past to live rent-free in my head. So anytime she says that, I always remind myself, okay, I'm obsessing about something, because the body does remember, right? The body remembers. Truly. And so I have to step in the present moment. I tell myself, you know, I don't want this living rent-free in my head. So to be able to put it aside, put it on the shelf, put it in a book, put it in my phone, put it sometimes on a private Facebook post. I do those too.
Right, yes. Only me.
Only me, only for me.
Only me.
It's an incredible thing to do. it's again part of that journey towards healing and journey towards hope to be able to do that. So thank you for setting that example today for us. Any last comments, or Sai, were you good?
I'm good.
He's worked all day. He's been working all day and like out in was it 110 degree, 105 degree weather, something ridiculous like that. So, and he just came back from it right now. So that's why I'm like, I feel so bad. But we appreciate you know having this time together to just be able to have this conversation. We're again creating that space that didn't exist before, and now it does. And being able to pass the mic on to someone else, such as yourself, it's tremendous. So it just brings my heart a lot of joy.
Thank you so much. You guys are doing wonderful things, and I can't wait to continue to see how this podcast progresses for you both. And Caesar, I look forward to getting to know you better. And just thank you for having me. Manahopu is thank you. And I know you both are learning your language. If okay, I will just end with a phrase that I recently learned of my own mono language, and is ano sinai ono amaya, and that is dream it, then do it.